Sarah Mitchell stared at the bronze nameplate mounted on the glass doors of the towering financial building. Her fingers trembled as she traced the engraved letters. Mitchell Financial Solutions, founded by Sarah J. Mitchell, CEO. 23. Years ago, her parents had walked through these very doors as desperate applicants, begging for a loan to save their failing hardware store. Today, they were about to walk through them again, not knowing their daughter owned the entire building. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The autumn rain drummed against the windows of Sarah's corner office on the 32nd floor as she watched two familiar figures hurry across the street below. Even from this height, she recognized her father's distinctive limp and her mother's habit of clutching her purse with both hands when nervous. They disappeared beneath the building's overhang, and Sarah knew they were heading to the loan department on the 3rd floor. She hadn't spoken to Robert and Linda Mitchell in 8 years. Not since that terrible Christmas dinner when her father had slammed his fist on the table and declared she was throwing her life away on impossible dreams. Her mother had nodded in agreement, adding that Sarah should accept reality and find a nice, stable job like her sister Emma, who worked as a receptionist at the local dentist's office. Sarah closed her eyes and let the memory wash over her. She had been 28 then, working 3 jobs to fund her small financial consulting business that she ran out of her studio apartment. Her parents had driven down from their hometown of Millbrook to spend the holidays, but the visit had turned into an intervention of sorts. "You're 30 next year, Sarah," her mother had said, her voice heavy with disappointment. "When are you going to stop this nonsense and get serious about your future? Look at Emma. She has benefits, steady pay, weekends off. She's building something real." Her father had been even more direct. "You've got a business degree gathering dust while you chase fantasies. No one's going to take financial advice from someone who can barely pay rent. You'll never be successful at this rate." The words had cut deeper than any physical wound. These were the people who were supposed to believe in her unconditionally, yet they saw her ambition as delusion, and her persistence as foolishness. That night, Sarah had made a decision that would define the next 2 decades of her life. She would prove them wrong, no matter what it took. The first years were brutal. Sarah worked as a night janitor at a corporate office building, cleaned houses on weekends, and spent her days cold-calling potential clients who usually hung up within seconds. She lived on ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches, wore the same 3 business outfits in rotation, and slept on a mattress on the floor because she couldn't afford a bed frame. Her parents' words echoed in her mind during the darkest moments, when a client yelled at her for a market downturn that was completely beyond her control, when she got food poisoning from expired groceries and had to work through it because she couldn't afford to miss a day. When her car broke down, she had to take 3 buses to meet a potential client, arriving sweaty and disheveled. But Sarah had inherited one thing from her parents: stubbornness. Robert Mitchell had kept his hardware store running for 15 years despite constant financial struggles, and Linda had worked double shifts at the factory for decades without complaint. Their daughter had that same relentless determination, even if they couldn't see it. The breakthrough came in her 4th year. Sarah had been managing finances for Mrs. Chen, an elderly widow who owned a small apartment building. Mrs. Chen's nephew, David Wu, was a successful real estate developer who had been watching Sarah's work. He was impressed by how she had helped his aunt increase her rental income by 30% while actually lowering her expenses. "I need someone like you on my team," David had told her over coffee at a diner that would later become the site of Sarah's 2nd office building. "I'm expanding into commercial real estate, and I need a financial advisor who understands the small details that the big firms miss." That contract changed everything. David's projects were substantial, and his referrals opened doors that Sarah had been knocking on for years. Within 18 months, she had hired her first employee, a recent college graduate named Marcus Thompson, who reminded her of herself at that age, hungry, determined, and willing to work twice as hard as anyone else. By her 7th year in business, Sarah had moved into a proper office space and was managing portfolios for 12 small businesses and 36 individual clients. She finally felt like she was building something real, something that could last. That's when she decided to reach out to her parents. The phone call lasted exactly 3 minutes. Her father answered, and his voice went cold the moment she identified herself. "Oh, it's you," he had said. "Still playing with other people's money, I suppose?" Sarah had tried to explain her success, to share her excitement about the business she was building. But Robert Mitchell cut her off. "When you're ready to have a real conversation about a real job, you can call us back," he said. "Until then, don't waste our time or yours." The line went dead, and Sarah stared at the phone in her hand, feeling like that 28-year-old failure all over again. But this time, the pain transformed into something harder and more focused. She hung up the phone, walked to her office window, and made a promise to herself and to the city sprawling below. She would become so successful that they couldn't ignore her anymore. So successful that their skepticism would look ridiculous in hindsight. So successful that they would have to acknowledge what she had built, even if they never acknowledged her. The next 15 years became a masterclass in controlled ambition. Sarah expanded her firm methodically, never overextending but never settling for comfort either. She specialized in helping small and medium-sized businesses optimize their finances, often saving them from the kind of financial disasters that had nearly destroyed her parents' hardware store years earlier. Her reputation grew through word of mouth and results. She helped a struggling restaurant chain restructure their debt and expand into 3 new cities. She guided a tech startup through their IPO, turning the founders into millionaires. She saved a family-owned manufacturing company from bankruptcy and helped them secure the contracts that made them industry leaders. With each success, Sarah's firm grew. She hired analysts, accountants, and advisors. She opened satellite offices in 3 states. She began acquiring smaller financial firms that aligned with her vision and values. By her 20th year in business, Mitchell Financial Solutions employed over 200 people and managed assets worth more than $800 million. But the crown jewel of Sarah's empire was the building itself. When the previous owner, a traditional bank that had been hemorrhaging money for years, put the 35-story downtown tower up for sale, Sarah saw an opportunity that went beyond mere real estate investment. This was the same building, where her parents had been denied a loan 23 years earlier. The same marble lobby where her father had paced nervously while her mother filled out application after application. The same mahogany-paneled conference room where a loan officer had looked at their hardware store's financial records and shaken his head with barely concealed disdain. Sarah bought the building for $42 million in cash. Sarah's assistant knocked softly on her office door. "Ms. Mitchell, there are 2 clients here for the 2 p.m. appointment with Mr. Rodriguez in the Small Business Lending Department." "Thank you, Jennifer. Please make sure they're comfortable in the waiting area." Sarah's voice remained steady, but her heart was racing. She pulled up the appointment details on her computer screen. Robert and Linda Mitchell, owners of Mitchell's Hardware, seeking a $75,000 loan to prevent foreclosure. The irony wasn't lost on her. Her parents' hardware store was failing, just as it had been decades earlier. But this time, instead of being turned away by indifferent bank officers, they were sitting in her building, waiting to plead their case to her employees. Sarah walked to her window and looked down at the busy street below. The last time she had driven through Millbrook, her hometown looked tired and weathered. Main Street had more empty storefronts than occupied ones, and her parents' hardware store sat between a vacant shoe shop and a struggling insurance office. The big box stores had moved 15 miles away, slowly draining the life from small businesses like theirs. She had kept tabs on them over the years, not out of sentimentality, but because she made it her business to know about every aspect of her past. Robert Mitchell was now 68 and Linda was 65. They had never expanded beyond the single store, never adapted to online sales, never implemented the inventory management systems that could have saved them thousands in overhead costs. They had stubbornly maintained the same business model for 30 years, watching their profits shrink as their competition grew. Sarah opened her laptop and accessed the preliminary loan application that Mr. Rodriguez had forwarded to her earlier that morning. The financial picture was worse than she had expected. Her parents owed $120,000 on the store property, had maxed out 3 credit cards, and were behind on their business insurance premiums. Their inventory was overstocked with slow-moving items, and their customer base had declined by 40% over the past 5 years. But what struck Sarah most was her father's handwritten note at the bottom of the application. "This store has been our life's work. We're not ready to give up on it yet." The same man who had told her to abandon her dreams was now clinging desperately to his own. Sarah closed the laptop and made her way to the elevator. She needed to see this for herself. The 3rd floor had been completely renovated when Sarah purchased the building. Gone was the intimidating atmosphere of the old bank, with its imposing marble columns and sterile fluorescent lighting. Instead, Sarah had created a warm, welcoming environment with comfortable seating areas, natural lighting, and walls lined with success stories from the small businesses they had helped over the years. She positioned herself at the coffee station, near the waiting area, where she could observe without being noticed. After 23 years, her parents looked older but unmistakably themselves. Her father still drummed his fingers impatiently when nervous, and her mother still organized and reorganized the contents of her purse when anxious. They were dressed in their best clothes, the same navy suit her father wore to church every Sunday, and the floral dress her mother had owned for at least a decade. They looked out of place among the sleek furniture and modern decor, like relics from a simpler time when a firm handshake and a good reputation were enough to secure a loan. "Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell?" A young man in his early 30s approached, them with a warm smile. This was Carlos Rodriguez, one of Sarah's most trusted loan officers. She had hired him 5 years earlier after he had been laid off from a traditional bank that valued quotas over relationships. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. "Thank you for coming in today," Carlos continued, leading them toward his office. "I've reviewed your application and I'd like to discuss some options with you." Sarah followed at a distance, her heels clicking softly on the polished floor. Carlos's office had glass walls that allowed for privacy while maintaining an open feel. She could see her parents settling into the chairs across from his desk, her father sitting rigidly upright while her mother clutched her purse in her lap. "I'll be honest with you," Carlos was saying as Sarah took a seat in the adjacent conference room, close enough to hear but far enough to remain unnoticed. "Your current financial situation is challenging. The numbers don't typically support the type of loan you're requesting." Sarah watched her father's shoulders sag slightly. This was the same conversation they had heard in this building 2 decades earlier, when Sarah was just starting her business and they were facing their first financial crisis. "However," Carlos continued, "I've been working with small businesses for 15 years, and I understand that numbers don't tell the whole story. Can you help me understand what makes your hardware store special? What would you do differently with this loan that would change your trajectory?" This was Sarah's approach. Dig deeper. Understand the human element behind the financial data. She had trained all her loan officers to look beyond spreadsheets and credit scores to find the potential for success. Robert Mitchell straightened in his chair. "We've been serving our community for 30 years, he said, his voice gaining strength. "When Mrs. Patterson's sink backed up at midnight, I opened the store at 6 a.m. to get her the parts she needed. When the high school needed supplies for their homecoming float, We donated everything they asked for. We know our customers by name, and they trust us. Linda Mitchell nodded enthusiastically. We want to modernize. We've been researching point-of-sale systems and inventory management software. We know we need to compete with the big stores, but we think we can do it by being more personal, more responsive to what our community actually needs. Sarah felt an unexpected pang of recognition. This was the same passion she had felt when building her own business, the same belief that personal relationships and genuine service could triumph over corporate efficiency. Carlos leaned forward. What specific changes would you make with the loan funds? Half would go to updating our inventory system and bringing in products that the big stores don't carry. Specialty items, hard-to-find parts, premium tools for serious craftsmen, Robert explained. The other half would help us create an online presence. Our grandson Tyler has been helping us understand e-commerce. We want to serve customers beyond just our town. Sarah almost smiled. Tyler was Emma's son, now 22 and fresh out of college with a degree in digital marketing. Apparently, he had inherited the Mitchell entrepreneurial spirit, even if it had skipped his mother's generation. We're not asking for charity, Linda added quietly. We're asking for a chance to prove that experience and dedication still count for something. Carlos nodded thoughtfully. I appreciate your honesty and your vision. Let me review some options with my team and get back to you within 48 hours. I want to find a way to make this work. As her parents left Carlos's office, Sarah remained in the conference room, processing what she had just witnessed. These weren't the same people who had dismissed her dreams as impossible fantasies. They were business owners fighting for their livelihood, just as she had done years earlier. They showed the same determination, the same refusal to give up, that had driven her to build her empire. But they still didn't know who was making the decision about their future. Sarah walked back to the elevator, her mind racing with possibilities. She could approve the loan easily. The amount was negligible compared to her firm's typical transactions. She could save her parents' business with a single signature, but she could also let them face the same rejection they had predicted for her dreams. She could watch their life's work crumble while they remained oblivious to their daughter's success. The elevator climbed silently toward her office, and Sarah realized that the next decision she made would define not just her parents' future, but her own relationship with the past that had shaped her into the woman she had become. Sarah spent the rest of the afternoon reviewing loan applications, but her mind kept drifting to the conversation she had overheard. By evening, she found herself driving through the quiet streets of Millbrook for the first time in over a decade. The town looked exactly as she remembered it, only more worn around the edges. The old movie theater had been converted into a thrift store, and the diner where she had celebrated her high school graduation now housed a check-cashing business. But Mitchell's Hardware still stood on the corner of Main and Oak, its faded green awning and hand-painted sign a stubborn reminder of simpler times. Sarah parked across the street and watched through the store's windows. Her father was arranging display items while her mother worked at the register with a customer. Even from a distance, she could see the careful attention they paid to each interaction. The way her father walked an elderly man to the door and pointed down the street toward the hardware items he couldn't provide. Her phone buzzed with a text. From Tyler Mitchell. Grandpa asked me to help with their website tonight. They're really trying to modernize. Hope the loan comes through. Sarah stared at the message. Tyler didn't know about her connection to Mitchell Financial Solutions. To him, she was just Aunt Sarah who had disappeared from family gatherings years ago after some argument he had. Been too young to understand, she typed back. What kind of website are you building? Online catalog, local delivery service, how-to videos for DIY projects. Grandpa knows every tool and its purpose. Could be amazing if they get the funding to expand inventory. Sarah smiled despite herself. Robert Mitchell did know tools. She remembered Saturday mornings when she was 12, following him around the store as he explained the difference between Phillips and Robertson screws, or demonstrated proper technique for using a miter saw. He had infinite patience for teaching, whether the student was his young daughter or a first-time homeowner buying their first hammer. Another message from Tyler. They're scared, though. This is their last shot. If this loan doesn't work out, they'll have to sell the building and retire. Mom says they might move to Florida. Sarah's chest tightened. Florida meant giving up completely, admitting defeat. It meant her parents would never see what she had accomplished, never have the chance to understand how wrong they had been about her potential. She started her car and drove to the motel on the outskirts of town. Room 237 was clean but dated, with floral wallpaper and a television that still had channel buttons. Sarah lay on the scratchy comforter and stared at the ceiling, wrestling with a decision that felt impossibly complex. The next morning, she returned to her office early and called Carlos Rodriguez. "I want to discuss the Mitchell hardware loan application," she said when he answered his phone. "I was just reviewing their file," Carlos replied. "It's a difficult case. They're passionate and experienced, but the numbers are concerning. They're asking for $75,000, but I think they really need closer to $125 to make meaningful changes. And honestly, even with the full amount, success isn't guaranteed in their market." Sarah had reached the same conclusion. "What would you recommend?" "If this were any other client, I'd suggest a smaller amount with very specific terms and milestones. Maybe $40,000 to start, with the remainder available if they meet certain benchmarks. But there's something about them that makes me want to take a bigger risk." "What do you mean?" Carlos was quiet for a moment. "They remind me of my grandfather. He owned a small grocery store in my neighborhood. Everyone said he should modernize or close, but he kept serving the community in ways the big chains couldn't. When Hurricane Rita hit, he was the only store that stayed open, running on generators and feeding people who had nowhere else to go. Sometimes the intangible value is worth more than what shows up on a balance sheet." Sarah felt a familiar warmth in her chest. This was why she had hired Carlos, why her firm had succeeded where others failed. They understood that business was ultimately about people, not just profit margins. "Schedule a follow-up meeting with them," Sarah said, "and put together a comprehensive proposal with options." "Will do. Should I copy you on the meeting notes?" Sarah hesitated. "Yes. And Carlos, when you meet with them, ask about their long-term vision, not just for the store but for their legacy. What do they want people to remember about Mitchell's hardware?" That afternoon, Sarah received an unexpected visitor. Emma Mitchell Parker stood in her reception area, looking nervous and out of place in her dental office scrubs. "I'm sorry to bother you," Emma said when Jennifer led her to Sarah's office. "I know we haven't talked in years, but I need to ask you something." Sarah gestured to the chair across from her desk. Her sister looked older than her 38 years, tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. "Tyler told me you were texting with him about Mom and Dad's situation," Emma continued. "I didn't know you were keeping in touch with him." "We reconnect occasionally on social media," Sarah said carefully. "He's a good kid." "He is, and he's the only one who seems to understand what Mom and Dad are going through right now." Emma's voice cracked slightly. "They're scared, Sarah. Really scared. This store is all they have left." Sarah leaned back in her chair. "What do you want me to do about it?" "I don't know. Maybe nothing. But Tyler mentioned that you work in finance now, and I thought, maybe you could give them advice. They're meeting with some loan officers tomorrow, and they have no idea how to present themselves to these corporate types." The irony was almost overwhelming. Emma was asking her successful sister to help their parents secure a loan from her own company, completely unaware of the connections she was describing. "Emma," Sarah said slowly, "what do you actually know about what I do for work?" Her sister looked embarrassed. "Tyler showed me your LinkedIn profile. You run some kind of consulting business. I know it's not what Mom and Dad wanted for you, but it seems like you're doing well." Sarah walked to her window and looked down at the street where her parents had walked just 24 hours earlier. What would you say if I told you I could help them get the loan they need? I'd say that would be a miracle, Emma replied. But I'd also ask what you want in return. I know you're still angry about how they treated you. Sarah turned back to face her sister. What if I told you that I'm not angry anymore? What if I told you that I understand why they reacted the way they did? Emma looked confused. I don't understand. They were scared for me, Emma. They saw me struggling and failing, and they thought they were protecting me from more disappointment. They wanted me to have security, stability, the things they never had when they were building their business. But they hurt you, Emma said quietly. The things they said at Christmas that year. I've never seen you so devastated, Sarah nodded. They did hurt me, but that hurt also motivated me to become someone they couldn't dismiss. And now I have the chance to help them, not because they deserve it or because they've apologized, but because it's the right thing to do. You're really going to help them? I'm going to try, Sarah said. But Emma, when this is over, when they understand what I've accomplished and how I've helped them, I need you to promise me something. What? Promise me you'll make sure they know that dreams aren't always impossible, that sometimes the people who believe in them the most are the ones who seem most unsupportive. And promise me you'll tell Tyler to never let anyone convince him that his ambitions are too big. Emma wiped her eyes and nodded. I promise. And Sarah? I'm sorry I never stood up for you back then. I was so focused on playing it safe that I forgot how brave you were being. As Emma left, Sarah felt a weight lifting from her shoulders that she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. Tomorrow, she would make a decision that would change everything for her family. But tonight, for the first time in years, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The morning of the follow-up meeting arrived gray and drizzly. Sarah stood in her office, watching the familiar figures of her parents cross the street below. This time, they moved with slightly more confidence, her father carrying a manila folder thick with documents while her mother held an umbrella over both of them. Sarah had spent most of the previous night crafting the loan proposal with Carlos. It was more generous than anything Mitchell Financial Solutions had ever offered to a business with such challenging financials. But every term had been carefully structured to give her parents the best possible chance at success. The loan would provide $95,000 over 5 years at an interest rate 2 points below market average. The first 6 months would be interest-only payments to give them time to implement changes. Most importantly, Sarah had authorized a business development specialist to work with them for the first year at no additional cost, something her firm typically charged $200 per hour for. But there was one condition that made Sarah's stomach churn with nervous anticipation. The loan required the business owners to meet personally with the firm's CEO for a final approval signature. Standard procedure for any loan over $75,000, Carlos had explained to her parents during their scheduling call. At 10:30 a.m., Jennifer knocked on Sarah's door. Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell are here for their appointment with you. Sarah took a deep breath. Please escort them to Conference Room A. I'll be there in 5 minutes. Conference Room A was Sarah's favorite meeting space. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, while the warm wood table and comfortable leather chairs created an atmosphere that was professional but not intimidating. She had chosen it specifically because she wanted her parents to feel welcome rather than overwhelmed. Sarah gathered the loan documents, her hands trembling slightly as she straightened the papers. 23 years of hurt, ambition, and determination had led to this moment. In 5 minutes, she would walk into that conference room and reveal to her parents that their daughter, the one they said would never be successful, was about to save their business. She paused at the conference room door, listening to the murmur of voices inside. Her father was explaining something about inventory turnover to Carlos, his voice animated in a way she hadn't heard in years. Her mother was asking detailed questions about the online payment processing systems, displaying a technological curiosity that surprised Sarah. Sarah opened the door and stepped inside. The conversation stopped abruptly. Her parents looked up from the documents spread across the table, and Sarah watched their faces cycle through confusion, recognition, and shock in rapid succession. "Sarah?" Her mother's voice was barely above a whisper. "Mom. Dad." Sarah moved to the head of the table, setting down the loan documents with steady hands despite her racing heart. "I understand you're here to discuss financing for Mitchell's hardware." Robert Mitchell's face had gone pale. "I don't understand. What are you doing here? Carlos said we were meeting with the CEO of the company." "You are," Sarah replied, settling into her chair. "I'm Sarah Mitchell, CEO and founder of Mitchell Financial Solutions. This is my company, and this is my building." The silence that followed was deafening. Linda Mitchell's hand went to her throat, and she looked around the conference room as if seeing it for the first time. Robert stared at his daughter, his mouth opening and closing without sound. "Your building," Linda finally managed. "I bought it 3 years ago. The same building where you were denied a loan in 2002. The same marble lobby where you filled out applications. The same offices where loan officers told you that your hardware store wasn't a viable investment." Carlos looked between Sarah and her parents, understanding dawning on his face. "Should I step out and give you privacy?" "No," Sarah said firmly. "This is a business meeting and you're my loan officer. Please, everyone sit down." Her parents remained frozen in their chairs, staring at their daughter as if she were a stranger. "I've reviewed your loan application," Sarah continued, opening the folder in front of her. "Your business is facing significant challenges, but Carlos and I believe there's potential for growth with the right support and capital injection." "Sarah," her father said hoarsely, "how is this possible? How did you afford—" "I built this company from nothing, Dad. The same business you told me to abandon because it would never work. The same dreams you called impossible fantasies." Sarah's voice remained calm and professional, but emotion flickered in her eyes. "I started with 3 clients and a desk in my studio apartment. Now I employ over 200 people and manage nearly $1 billion in assets." Linda Mitchell's eyes filled with tears. "We had no idea. How could we not know?" "Because you stopped listening to me 8 years ago. Because you decided my life wasn't worth paying attention to unless I was doing what you thought was practical and safe." The weight of those lost years hung heavy in the room. Robert Mitchell aged visibly as he processed the magnitude of what his daughter had accomplished and what his dismissal had cost their relationship. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. We were wrong about everything." "You were scared," Sarah replied. "You saw me struggling and you wanted to protect me from more failure. I understand that now. But you never gave me the chance to prove that I could succeed." She opened the loan documents and placed them in front of her parents. "Mitchell Financial Solutions is prepared to offer you a $95,000 loan at 4.2% interest over 5 years. The terms are extremely favorable and will provide business development support to help you modernize your operations." Her parents stared at the papers in disbelief. "But," Sarah continued, "I need something from you in return." The room tensed. Robert and Linda exchanged worried glances, probably expecting their daughter to demand an apology or some form of public acknowledgement of their past mistakes. "I need you to promise me that you'll never dismiss someone else's dreams the way you dismissed mine," Sarah said quietly. "Tyler has big ideas about digital marketing and e-commerce. Emma has been talking about going back to school for her nursing degree. Other young people in Millbrook probably have businesses they want to start or changes they want to make." She leaned forward, her voice gaining strength. "I need you to be the people who say, 'How can we help?' instead of, 'That's impossible.' I need you to remember what it feels like to have someone believe in your vision, even when the numbers don't look promising." Linda Mitchell reached across the table and grasped her daughter's hand. "We promise." "Sarah, we promise." Robert cleared his throat, struggling to find words. "I don't know how to thank you. I don't know how to apologize for all the years we wasted, all the things we said." "You don't need to apologize," Sarah interrupted. "You need to succeed. You need to make this loan worth the investment, not just financially, but as proof that second chances matter, that families can heal, that it's never too late to support each other's dreams." Carlos, who had been quietly witnessing this family reconciliation, smiled as he watched Robert Mitchell sign the loan documents with shaking hands. This was why he loved working for Sarah's company. They didn't just provide capital, they created opportunities for people to rebuild their lives and relationships. As her parents prepared to leave, Linda Mitchell turned back to her daughter. Would you consider coming to dinner on Sunday? I know it's been a long time, but I'd like to cook for you. I'd like to hear about your business, about your life." Sarah smiled, the first genuine smile she had shared with her parents in over 2 decades. "I'd like that, Mom. I'd like that very much." After they left, Sarah remained in the conference room, looking out at the city she had conquered through sheer determination and the desire to prove her parents wrong. Now she had the chance to prove something even more important, that success meant nothing without the people you loved to share it with. Sunday arrived with the kind of crisp autumn weather that made Millbrook look like a postcard. Sarah pulled into the gravel driveway of her childhood home, noting how small everything seemed compared to her memories. The 2-story house with its faded blue shutters and overgrown garden looked tired but well-maintained, like its owners. She sat in her Mercedes for a moment, gathering courage. The last time she had walked through that front door, she had left in anger and pain, convinced she would never return. Now she was coming back as someone entirely different, successful, powerful, wealthy, but also, she realized, still, their daughter. The front door opened before she could knock. Linda Mitchell stood there wearing a floral apron over her best dress, her eyes bright with nervous excitement. "Sarah, you came," she said, as if she hadn't quite believed it would happen until this moment. "I said I would, Mom." The house smelled exactly as Sarah remembered. Coffee, vanilla candles, and the faint scent of wood polish that her mother used on the antique furniture. Family photos lined the hallway, but Sarah noticed that several pictures of her had been added recently. Her college graduation photo, which had been relegated to a side table, now hung prominently near the staircase. A newspaper clipping about Mitchell Financial Solutions winning a Best Places to Work award was framed on the mantelpiece. "I've been collecting articles about your company," Linda admitted, following Sarah's gaze. "Tyler helped me search online. I had no idea how much you'd accomplished." Robert Mitchell emerged from the kitchen, wearing an apron that read, "World's Best Grandpa." A gift from Tyler, Sarah assumed. Her father looked older than she remembered, more fragile, but his eyes held a warmth she hadn't seen in decades. "Sarah." He approached hesitantly, as if unsure whether a hug would be welcome. She made the decision for him, stepping forward and embracing him briefly. He felt smaller than her memories, and she realized that sometime over the past 20 years, she had grown from the child seeking his approval into the adult who no longer needed it. Dinner was pot roast with all the traditional sides, mashed, potatoes, green beans, dinner rolls that Linda had made from scratch. It was the same meal her mother had prepared for every special occasion during Sarah's childhood, and the familiar flavors transported her back to simpler times. "Tell us about your business," Robert said as they settled around the dining room table. "I mean, if you're comfortable sharing, I know we don't have the right to ask after all these years." Sarah set down her fork, considering how to explain 2 decades of struggle and triumph to the people who had missed it all. "It started with Mrs. Chen," she began, and found herself telling the story she had never shared with anyone. Not just the business milestones, but the personal cost. The nights she had cried herself to sleep wondering if her parents were right. The moments when she had almost given up and looked for a real job. The way their rejection had both motivated and haunted her. Her parents listened in complete silence, their expressions shifting from amazement to pride to regret and back again. The first year I made a profit. Really made a profit, not just broke even. I drove to a payphone and almost called you, Sarah admitted. I wanted to share the good news, but then I remembered Christmas dinner and I hung up instead. Linda reached across the table and squeezed her daughter's hand. We missed so much. Your successes, your struggles, your life. How do we make up for that? You don't, Sarah said gently. You can't change the past, but you can be present for the future. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of a car in the driveway. Through the window, Sarah saw Emma's minivan pulling up, followed by a pickup truck she didn't recognize. I hope you don't mind, Linda said nervously. Emma asked if she could stop by with the kids, and Tyler wanted to meet his famous aunt properly. We haven't had the whole family together in so long. Sarah's stomach tightened. She wasn't sure she was ready for a full family reunion, especially with Emma's children, who barely knew her. Emma entered first, followed by 2 elementary school-aged kids who hung back shyly. Behind them came Tyler, now a tall young man with earnest eyes and an easy smile that reminded Sarah of herself at that age. Aunt Sarah! Tyler stepped forward without hesitation, offering a firm handshake. I can't believe you're the CEO of the company that's helping Grandpa and Grandma. This is incredible. The children, Emma's daughter Katie, age 9, and son, Michael, age 7, peered at Sarah with curious eyes. Are you really rich? Katie asked with the blunt honesty of childhood. Katie, Emma scolded, but Sarah laughed. I'm comfortable, Sarah replied. But more importantly, I'm happy with my work. Do you know what you want to do when you grow up? I want to be a veterinarian, Katie announced. Mom says it's really hard and takes lots of school. It is hard, Sarah agreed. But if you really want it, you can make it happen. The hard things are usually the most rewarding. She glanced at Emma, who was smiling with genuine warmth for the first time in years. As the evening progressed, Sarah found herself relaxing into the familiar rhythms of family dinner. Tyler peppered her with questions about business strategy and digital marketing. Emma shared stories about returning to school for her nursing prerequisites, a dream she had apparently harbored for years. The children warmed up quickly, and soon Katie was showing Sarah drawings while Michael demonstrated his soccer skills in the backyard. But it was her father's transformation that struck Sarah most profoundly. The man who had once dismissed her ambitions was now asking detailed questions about market analysis and strategic planning. He listened intently as she explained how she had identified underserved niches in the financial services industry, nodding, with the same focused attention he had once given to complicated repair jobs. You know, Robert said as they cleared dishes together, I've been thinking about what you said on Friday, about supporting other people's dreams. There's a young woman who comes into the store, Jennifer Walsh. She's been asking me about starting a handyman business, targeting all these new developments where people don't know how to do basic repairs. Sarah raised an eyebrow. What did you tell her? Before Friday, I would have told her it was too competitive, too risky for someone without established connections. He paused, drying a plate with deliberate care. But yesterday, I spent an hour helping her write a business plan. She knows tools, she's reliable, and she's identified a real need in the market. I think she could succeed. That's wonderful. Dad? I also told her about your company, though maybe when she's ready she could apply for a small business loan. Sarah smiled, realizing that her father was already becoming the mentor she had needed him to be all those years ago. Later, as the family gathered in the living room, Tyler pulled out his laptop. I've been working on the new website for the hardware store, he said, angling the screen so everyone could see. But I had an idea for something bigger. What if we created a platform that connects small businesses in rural areas with resources they need? Funding, mentorship, marketing support. Sarah leaned forward, intrigued. The website mock-up was impressive, clean and professional with intuitive navigation. "Explain your thinking," she said. Tyler's eyes lit up. Small towns like Millbrook are full of people with great ideas, but no idea how to execute them. They need what you needed when you started, not just money, but guidance, connections, someone who believes in them. What if we could create a network that provides all of that? Sarah looked around the room. Her parents were listening intently. Emma was nodding enthusiastically, and the children had abandoned their toys to pay attention to Tyler's presentation. "It's ambitious," Sarah said carefully. "It would require significant startup capital, partnerships with established financial institutions, and a team of experienced business advisors." Tyler's face fell slightly. "So you think it's unrealistic?" The room went quiet. Sarah realized that everyone was waiting for her response, and that her answer would set the tone for how this family approached dreams and ambitions going forward. "I think it's exactly the kind of unrealistic idea that changes the world," Sarah said firmly. "I also think you'll need help developing it properly. Would you be interested in an internship at Mitchell Financial Solutions next summer? We could use someone with your digital skills and your understanding of small-town business challenges." Tyler's face broke into a grin that rivaled the sun. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. But you'll have to work harder than you've ever worked in your life. And you'll probably fail at least a dozen times before you figure out what works." "Just like you did," he said, and Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest. As the evening wound down, Sarah found herself on the front porch with her parents, watching the stars emerge in the clear night sky. "I need to tell you something," Linda said quietly. "After you left that Christmas, I cried for 3 days straight. Robert pretended he didn't care, but I caught him reading business magazines, trying to understand what you were doing." Robert cleared his throat. "I was scared for you. I'd watched my own father chase dream after dream and never quite succeed. I thought I was protecting you from that kind of disappointment." "But you were also proud," Linda continued. "Deep down, we both knew you had something special. We just didn't know how to support it without watching you get hurt." Sarah looked at her parents, seeing them clearly perhaps for the first time in her adult life. They weren't the giants of her childhood, or the obstacles of her young adulthood. They were just people, flawed and loving and human, who had made mistakes while trying to do their best. "I forgive you," she said simply. "Both of you. For all of it." The words hung in the cool night air, carrying with them the weight of 23 years of hurt and misunderstanding. "Can you forgive us for missing so much?" Robert asked. Sarah considered the question seriously. Could she forgive them for the graduation ceremonies they hadn't attended, the achievements they hadn't celebrated, the struggles they hadn't supported? Could she forgive them for not knowing her as the woman she had become? "Yes," she said finally. "But only if you promise to be present from now on. Really present. I don't need you to understand everything about my business or my life, but I need you to try. I need you to ask questions and listen to the answers and believe that I know what I'm doing. We promise," Linda said immediately. "And I need you to do the same for Tyler, for Emma, for Katie and Michael when they're older. I need you to be the parents and grandparents who say, 'How can we help?' instead of 'That's impossible.'" Robert nodded solemnly. "We've learned that. Lesson the hard way. We won't make the same mistake twice." As Sarah drove back to her hotel that night, she reflected on how different this homecoming had been from what she had imagined during all those years of anger and determination. She had expected vindication, validation, perhaps even a small measure of revenge. Instead, she had found something far more valuable, the family she had thought she had lost forever. Her phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. "Thank you for tonight, and thank you for not giving up on your dreams, even when no one believed in them. You've shown all of us what's possible." Sarah smiled, realizing that her greatest success wasn't the building with her name on it or the company she had built. From nothing. It was this moment, this healing, this chance to be the mentor and supporter she had needed all those years ago. The little girl who had once sought her parents' approval had become the woman who could give it to others, freely and without conditions. And perhaps that transformation was the most valuable business she had ever built. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the newly renovated Mitchell's Hardware, barely recognizing the space she had visited as a child. Gone were the cramped aisles and dusty overhead storage. In their place, Tyler had designed an open floor plan with clearly marked sections, digital inventory displays, and interactive kiosks where customers could access how-to videos and product comparisons. The transformation had exceeded everyone's expectations. Sales were up 43%, and the store was serving customers from 3 neighboring towns. More importantly, Robert and Linda Mitchell had rediscovered their passion for the business, approaching each day with an energy that reminded Sarah of entrepreneurs half their age. "The paint mixer arrived this morning," her father announced, gesturing toward a sophisticated machine that looked like it belonged in a laboratory rather than a small-town hardware store. "We can now match any color sample within 2 minutes." Jennifer Walsh suggested it after she noticed how many customers were driving to Home Depot just for custom paint colors. Sarah smiled at the mention of Jennifer Walsh, who had indeed secured a small business loan from Mitchell Financial Solutions and was now running the most successful handyman service in the county. She had become something of a protege to Robert, stopping by the store weekly to discuss business challenges and growth strategies. "The numbers look incredible," Sarah said, reviewing the quarterly report Tyler had prepared. "You're outperforming our most optimistic projections." "It's not just about the numbers," Linda said, emerging from behind the new customer service counter where she had been training 2 part-time employees, recent high school graduates who were earning money for college while learning valuable business skills. "We're having fun again. Every day brings new challenges, new customers, new opportunities to solve problems." Tyler bounded down from the mezzanine level he had converted into a workshop space where customers could test tools and attend weekend DIY classes taught by local craftsmen. "Aunt Sarah, perfect timing," he said, his excitement palpable. "I have something to show you." He led her to a computer terminal near the front of the store. On the screen was a polished website with the header, Rural Ventures Network. "Remember? My idea about connecting small businesses in rural areas?" Tyler continued. "Well, I've been working on it during my evenings and weekends. We now have 47 small businesses signed up across 6 states, and 3 banks interested in partnering with us for microloans." Sarah studied the screen, impressed by the professional design and comprehensive features. There were sections for business plan templates, mentorship matching, peer networking forums, and resource libraries covering everything from marketing strategies to accounting basics. "This is remarkable, Tyler. How did you manage to build this while working full-time on the store renovation?" "I haven't been sleeping much," he admitted with a grin. "But Jennifer introduced me to Marcus Thompson from your staff. He's been mentoring me on the financial services side. And I've been collaborating with a developer in Portland who grew up in a small town and understands the challenges." Robert joined the conversation, pride evident in his voice. "He's been getting calls from economic development councils in rural counties across the Midwest. They want to pilot the platform in their communities." Sarah felt a familiar flutter of excitement, the same feeling she had experienced in the early days of building her own company when possibilities seemed limitless, and every phone call could change everything. "What do you need to take this to the next level?" she asked. Tyler's expression grew serious. "Honestly, I need to choose between this and college. The platform is growing faster than I anticipated, and I can't give it the attention it deserves, while taking a full course load. But Mom thinks I'm crazy to consider leaving school." Sarah glanced at Emma, who had arrived with her children for their monthly family dinner at the store, a tradition that had evolved naturally as the renovated space had become a community gathering point. "What I think?" Emma said carefully. is that I was wrong to push you toward the safe path without considering your actual goals and talents. But I also think you should make this decision with all the facts. What kind of facts? Tyler asked. Sarah pulled out her phone and scrolled to her calendar app. I'm flying to Chicago next week to meet with venture capital firms about a new project. Would you like to come with me? You could present Rural Ventures Network to some people who invest in early-stage companies. Get some professional feedback on your business model and growth potential. Tyler's eyes widened. You'd really take me with you? Only if you're serious about this. These meetings aren't practice rounds. They're with people who could provide the funding to scale your platform nationally. But they'll also ask hard questions about market size, competitive advantages, and long-term sustainability that you'll need to answer convincingly. I'm ready, Tyler said without hesitation. Emma looked nervous, but nodded her support. Just promise me you'll finish this semester before making any major decisions. I promise, Mom. As the family gathered around the store's new cafe area, another of Tyler's innovations that had turned the hardware store into a community hub, Sarah reflected on how dramatically everything had changed. Katie was showing her latest art project to Robert, who was giving her the same focused attention he had once reserved for complex repair jobs. Michael was helping Linda organize inventory in the children's tool section Tyler had created. Emma was studying nursing textbooks at one of the small tables, taking advantage of the quiet evening hours to prepare for her upcoming exams. But it was the changes in her parents that struck Sarah most profoundly. Robert had embraced technology with an enthusiasm that surprised everyone, becoming the store's unofficial social media manager and posting daily tips and project ideas that had attracted followers from across the region. Linda had enrolled in an online business management course and was implementing systems that had streamlined operations and improved customer satisfaction scores. They had become the mentors and encouragers that Sarah had needed all those years. But they were directing that support toward the next generation of dreamers and entrepreneurs. I have an announcement, Emma said during dinner, setting down her fork with a nervous smile. I've been accepted to the accelerated nursing program at State University. I start in January. The table erupted in congratulations and excited questions. Emma explained that she would be able to complete her RN degree in 18 months through a program designed for working adults. The hospital in the county seat had already expressed interest in hiring her upon graduation. I'm proud of you, Sarah told her sister privately as they cleaned up after dinner. It takes courage to change direction in your 30s. I learned that from watching you, Emma replied. You could have played it safe after college, found a corporate job, lived the life Mom and Dad wanted for you. Instead, you risked everything to build something meaningful. I also had the luxury of being young and single with no dependents, Sarah pointed out. What you're doing is harder, balancing education with family responsibilities and a job. But I have something you didn't have back then, Emma said. I have family support. I have parents who believe in my goals and a sister who's shown me what's possible when you refuse to give up. Later that evening, Sarah walked through downtown Millbrook with Tyler, discussing his platform and the upcoming Chicago meetings. The town looked different than it had during her childhood. Several new businesses had opened, including a coffee roastery run by a young couple who had moved from Seattle specifically to start their venture in a smaller community. It's interesting how things change, Tyler observed. A few years ago, young people were leaving small towns for opportunities in big cities. Now, some are moving in the opposite direction, looking for communities where they can make a real impact. What do you think is driving that change? Sarah asked. Technology, partly. You can run a sophisticated business from anywhere with good internet access. But I think it's also about values. People want to be part of something bigger than themselves, want to contribute to communities where their efforts make a visible difference. Sarah nodded, thinking about her own journey from small-town dreamer to big-city success story and back to someone invested in small-town prosperity. That's part of what excites me about Rural Ventures Network, Tyler continued. It's not just about providing resources to individual businesses, It's about creating ecosystems where small communities can thrive economically while maintaining their character and values. They paused outside the old movie theater, which now housed a combination bookstore and art gallery run by a retired teacher who had moved to Millbrook from Chicago. "You know what I realized?" Tyler said. "Success isn't just about building something big. It's about building something that makes other people's success possible, too." Sarah felt a surge of pride and recognition. Tyler had arrived at the same conclusion that had driven her to create Mitchell Financial Solutions, that the most meaningful achievements were those that lifted others up, rather than simply accumulating personal wealth or recognition. Her phone buzzed with a text from Carlos Rodriguez. The Jenkins family restaurant secured their expansion loan. They're naming their new location Second Chances Cafe in honor of our company's motto. Thought you'd want to know. Sarah smiled, remembering the Jenkins family's story. They had been turned down by 3 banks before Mitchell Financial Solutions approved their loan to expand their family restaurant. Now they were opening their second location and creating jobs in a struggling downtown district. These were the victories that mattered most, not the quarterly profit reports or industry awards, but the tangible proof that her company was creating opportunities for families and communities to flourish. "Aunt Sarah," Tyler said as they headed back toward the hardware store, "can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Do you ever regret the years you lost with Grandpa and Grandma? All the time you spent being angry instead of building a relationship with them?" Sarah considered the question carefully. It was something she had wrestled with during quiet moments over the past several months. "I regret that it took so long for us to understand each other," she said finally. "But I don't regret the anger, because that anger motivated me to prove them wrong. And I don't regret the distance, because it forced me to become independent and self-reliant. Sometimes we need to break away completely before we can come back, as equals. Do you think they really understand now what they put you through? I think they understand that they underestimated me and that their fear for my security blinded them to my potential. But I also think they were doing the best they could with the information and experiences they had at the time." "Perfect parents only exist in movies," Tyler laughed. "Good thing, because perfect kids only exist in movies too." As they reached the store, Sarah noticed that the lights were still on in the workshop area. Through the windows, she could see Robert working on a project with Jennifer Walsh, apparently teaching her how to repair a vintage handplane that one of her clients had asked her to restore. The scene crystallized everything that had changed over the past 6 months. Her father, who had once dismissed dreams as impractical fantasies, was now investing his time and expertise in helping others pursue their entrepreneurial goals. The store that had once been a struggling remnant of an outdated business model had become a catalyst for community economic development, and Sarah herself had evolved from someone seeking vindication to someone providing opportunity, from a daughter proving her worth to a leader creating worth for others. "Tyler," she said as they prepared to part ways, "regardless of what happens in Chicago, regardless of whether you choose college or entrepreneurship or some combination of both, I want you to remember something." "What's that?" "Success isn't about proving other people wrong. It's about proving yourself right. It's about building something that reflects your values and creates value for others. Everything else, the money, the recognition, the satisfaction of proving doubters wrong, is just a bonus." Tyler nodded thoughtfully. "Is that what you learned from all this?" Sarah looked up at the building where her name now appeared prominently, on a bronze plaque by the main entrance, not as a monument to her ego, but as a symbol of second chances and family reconciliation. "That's what I learned," she confirmed, "and it only took me 23 years to figure it out." As Tyler headed home and Sarah drove back to her hotel, she felt a deep sense of completion that had nothing to do with business metrics or financial achievements. She had built a successful company, repaired fractured relationships, and created opportunities for the next generation to pursue their own impossible dreams. But perhaps most importantly, she had learned that the greatest success was not the building with her name on it, but the family who finally understood her name belonged there. 2 years later, Sarah stood on the stage of the Chicago Convention Center, looking out at an audience of over 3,000 entrepreneurs, investors, and business leaders. The banner behind her read, "Rural Innovation Summit, Connecting Small-Town Dreams to Global Opportunities." What had started as Tyler's college project had evolved into a movement that was reshaping how America thought about rural economic development. When I first heard about Rural Ventures Network, Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly through the packed auditorium, I was skeptical. Not because the idea wasn't good, but because I knew how difficult it would be to execute. Building a platform that serves diverse rural communities across multiple states requires understanding local cultures, individual challenges, and unique opportunities that can't be captured in a simple business model. She clicked to the first slide, showing a map dotted with hundreds of pins representing businesses that had launched or expanded through the platform. But my nephew Tyler Mitchell understood something that took me decades to learn. He understood that success isn't just about individual achievement, it's about creating systems that make success possible for others. In the front row, Tyler sat with his co-founder, Elena Rodriguez, the developer from Portland who had become his business partner and more recently his fiancée. Next to them sat Robert and Linda Mitchell, wearing matching Rural Ventures Network polo shirts and beaming with pride that was visible even from the stage. Emma occupied the seat beside her parents, her nursing school graduation pin gleaming on her lapel. She had completed her RN degree in record time and was now working as a critical care nurse while pursuing her master's degree in healthcare administration. Her goal was to address the nursing shortage in rural hospitals, another dream that the family had rallied to support. The traditional model of economic development focuses on attracting large corporations to relocate to rural areas, Sarah continued. Rural Ventures Network flipped that model. Instead of trying to bring big business to small towns, we focus on helping small towns grow their own businesses. The statistics that followed were impressive. Over the past 18 months, the platform had facilitated the launch of 847 new rural businesses, created more than 4,200 jobs, and generated over $180 million in local economic activity. But the numbers that mattered most to Sarah were the personal stories behind those figures. Like Maria Santos, who had used the platform to launch a specialty food business featuring recipes from her grandmother's Mexican restaurant. Her products were now sold in grocery stores across the Southwest, and she employed 12 people in her New Mexico hometown, or David Kim, a software engineer who had moved from Silicon Valley to rural Montana to care for his aging parents. Through Rural Ventures Network, he connected with other remote tech workers and formed a consulting company that provided cybersecurity services to small businesses nationwide. Or the partnership between 3 farming families in Iowa who had used the platform's resources to launch a sustainable agriculture cooperative that was now supplying organic produce to restaurants in 5 major cities. Each of these businesses started with someone who had a dream and the courage to pursue it, Sarah said. But courage alone isn't enough. Dreams need resources, guidance, and communities that believe in them. After her keynote address, Sarah made her way to the exhibition hall where dozens of Rural Ventures Network success stories had set up booths to showcase their products and services. The energy was infectious. Entrepreneurs sharing strategies, investors discovering opportunities, and established business leaders offering mentorship to newcomers. She paused at a booth run by Jennifer Walsh, whose handyman service had evolved into a full-scale construction company specializing in historic renovation projects. Jennifer was explaining her expansion plans to a group of potential investors, her confidence and expertise evident in every word. "Sarah," Jennifer called out when she spotted her, "I have someone I want you to meet." She introduced a young man named Kevin Park, who had recently moved to Millbrook to launch a drone services company focusing on agricultural applications and infrastructure inspection. Kevin heard about our community through the Rural Ventures Network directory, Jennifer explained. He's the third tech entrepreneur to relocate here in the past year. Sarah shook Kevin's hand, marveling at how Millbrook had transformed from a town that young people fled to one that attracted ambitious newcomers. The hardware store was now just one of several thriving businesses on Main Street, which had been featured in a national magazine as an example of successful rural revitalization. What drew you to Millbrook specifically? Sarah asked Kevin. The community support structure, he replied immediately. I researched dozens of small towns, but this was the only place where I found established mentorship networks, affordable commercial space, and a track record of helping new businesses succeed. Plus, Jennifer's construction company can handle all my facility needs, and Tyler's platform connected me with other entrepreneurs facing similar challenges. As Sarah continued through the exhibition hall, she was struck by how many of the success stories had connections to each other. Rural Ventures Network hadn't just created individual businesses, it had fostered an ecosystem where entrepreneurs supported each other's growth and success. At the book signing area, she found Tyler and Elena surrounded by a crowd of aspiring entrepreneurs eager to get copies of their recently published guide. Small Towns, Big Dreams, a practical guide to rural entrepreneurship. Aunt Sarah! Tyler waved her over. Perfect timing. Elena just got off the phone with a publisher who wants to create a series of regional business development guides based on our model. Elena, whom Sarah had grown to love like a second niece, was practically vibrating with excitement. They want to start with the Pacific Northwest, then expand to the Southeast and Great Plains regions. Each guide would be customized for the specific challenges and opportunities in those areas. Sarah felt the familiar thrill of watching a good idea expand beyond its original scope. Tyler and Elena had built something that was genuinely changing lives and communities, and their success was creating opportunities for even more people to pursue their entrepreneurial dreams. Later that evening, at the summit's closing dinner, Sarah found herself seated at a table with her family and several of the entrepreneurs who had become like extended family over the past 2 years. The conversation ranged from business strategy to family updates to dreams for the future. I have an announcement, Emma said during dessert, her cheeks flushed with excitement. I've been accepted to the executive MBA program at Northwestern. I want to combine my healthcare experience with business training to help rural hospitals improve their operations and financial sustainability. The table erupted in congratulations and excited questions. Emma explained that she had been inspired by seeing how business principles could be applied to solve social problems, and she wanted to use her education to address the healthcare challenges facing rural communities. Following in the family tradition of impossible dreams, Robert said with a grin that showed how much his perspective had changed. Speaking of family traditions, Linda added, your father and I have some news too. Sarah raised an eyebrow, curious about what her parents might announce at a business conference. We're franchising Mitchell's Hardware, Robert said, unable to contain his excitement. 3 other small towns have approached us about replicating our model, the combination of traditional hardware store with modern technology, community workspace, and entrepreneur support services. Sarah stared at her parents in amazement. 2 years ago, they had been struggling to keep a single store afloat. Now they were planning to expand their concept to multiple locations. The first location will be in Emma's town, Linda continued. We want to create a network of community business hubs that support each other and share resources. Tyler leaned forward eagerly. And we're integrating the hardware store franchise with Rural Ventures Network. Each location will serve as a physical meeting place for local entrepreneurs and a distribution center for products created by platform members. Sarah felt a deep sense of satisfaction as she watched her family members building on each other's successes. The anger and disconnection that had defined their relationships for so many years had been replaced by collaboration and mutual support. But the conversation that moved her most came later, as she and her parents stood on the hotel's rooftop terrace, looking out at the Chicago skyline. Do you remember what you said to us that night at Christmas? Linda asked softly. About how we would never understand what you were trying to build. Sarah nodded, the memory still vivid after all these years. I've been thinking about that a lot lately, Linda continued. And I realized that you were right. We couldn't understand what you were building because we were thinking too small. We thought you were just trying to start a business. We didn't realize you were trying to create a legacy. Robert placed his hand on Sarah's shoulder. Everything we're doing now, the store expansion, supporting Tyler and Elena, encouraging Emma's education, it all traces back to the example you set. You showed us that the size of your dreams determines the size of your impact. Sarah felt tears gathering in her eyes. These were the words she had needed to hear 25 years ago, but receiving them now felt even more meaningful because they came from a place of understanding rather than obligation. I'm proud of who you've become, Robert continued. Not just the successful businesswoman, but the person who uses her success to lift up others. You've become the kind of leader I wish I had been when you needed one. You became that leader when it mattered most, Sarah replied. Tyler and Emma and Jennifer and all these other entrepreneurs, they have the support and encouragement that I didn't have. You've given them what you learned too late to give me. Linda wiped her eyes with a tissue. Do you think we've made up for lost time? Sarah considered the question seriously. Could any amount of present support compensate for the years of dismissal and discouragement? Could current understanding erase past hurt? I don't think it's about making up for lost time, she said finally. I think it's about making the time we have left count for something meaningful. And that's exactly what we're doing. As they prepared to leave Chicago the next morning, Sarah received a call from Marcus Thompson, who had been managing Mitchell Financial Solutions during her absence. Sarah, I have some interesting news, Marcus said. We just received a call from the Small Business Administration. They want to partner with us to create a national rural lending program based on our model. They're offering to back loans worth up to $500 million over the next 3 years. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. This was the kind of opportunity that could expand their impact exponentially, helping thousands of rural entrepreneurs access the capital they needed to build their dreams. What would the partnership look like? She asked. We would maintain our current operations, but also serve as a regional hub for SBA-backed rural loans. They're particularly interested in our integration with Rural Ventures Network and our track record of supporting businesses that other lenders consider too risky. Sarah looked around the hotel lobby where entrepreneurs from dozens of small towns were saying goodbye and making plans to stay connected. These were people who had found each other through Tyler's platform, supported each other through challenges, and celebrated each other's successes. Set up a meeting for next week, she told Marcus. If we can help more people like these access the resources they need, we have an obligation to do it. As the family drove back to Millbrook together, a tradition that had evolved naturally from their reconciliation, Sarah reflected on how dramatically her definition of success had evolved. The young woman who had started Mitchell Financial Solutions to prove her parents wrong had become someone who used her platform to prove that small-town dreams could achieve big-city impact. But the most profound change wasn't in her business or her wealth or her recognition. It was in her understanding that the greatest success wasn't individual achievement, but the ability to create conditions where others could achieve their own version of success. Aunt Sarah, Katie said from the back seat where she was working. On homework. I have to write an essay about someone I admire. Can I write about you? I'd be honored, Sarah replied. But make sure you include your grandparents and your Uncle Tyler in the story. Success is never really an individual achievement. As they drove through the countryside toward home, Sarah realized that the little girl who had once dreamed of having her name on a building had achieved something far more valuable. She had her name on a legacy of people who believed in impossible dreams and supported each other in making them reality. And that legacy would outlast any building. 5 years had passed since that life-changing loan meeting in conference room A, and Sarah Mitchell stood in the same spot where she had once watched her parents unknowingly enter her building as desperate applicants. Today, she was watching a very different scene unfold on the street below. A ribbon-cutting ceremony was taking place across from Mitchell Financial Solutions headquarters. The new building bore a sign that read, Rural Innovation Center, a Tyler Mitchell and Elena Rodriguez Foundation. Local news crews captured the moment as Tyler and Elena, now married and expecting their first child, cut the ceremonial ribbon alongside the mayor, several state legislators, and a crowd of entrepreneurs from across the region. Sarah smiled as she recognized faces in the crowd. Jennifer Walsh, who now employed 37 people in her construction and renovation company. Kevin Park, whose drone services business had expanded to serve agricultural clients in 12 states. Maria Santos, who had flown in from New Mexico, where her specialty food company was planning its third production facility. The Rural Innovation Center represented the physical manifestation of everything Tyler and Elena had built digitally through the Rural Ventures Network. The 5-story building housed co-working spaces, maker studios, conference facilities, and a business incubator specifically designed to serve rural entrepreneurs who needed physical space to develop their ideas. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from her assistant. The documentary crew is here for your 3 p.m. interview. She had initially resisted the idea of participating in a documentary about rural entrepreneurship, but Tyler had convinced her that sharing their family's story could inspire other families to bridge their own generational and philosophical divides. The filmmakers had been following several Rural Ventures Network success stories for the past year, and Sarah's transformation from rejected daughter to family matriarch was apparently the narrative thread that tied everything together. As she made her way to the conference room where the interview would take place, Sarah passed the wall of framed newspaper clippings and magazine articles that chronicled Mitchell Financial Solutions' growth. But her attention was drawn to a newer edition, a photo from last month's Mitchell family reunion, the first in over 30 years. The image captured 4 generations gathered around the picnic tables at Millbrook's newly renovated town park. Robert and Linda Mitchell sat in the center, surrounded by their expanding family. Emma with her husband and children, Tyler and Elena with Elena's parents who had driven up from Portland, and scattered throughout the frame, the entrepreneurs, who had become like adopted family members over the years. What struck Sarah most about the photo was how natural everyone looked together, as if the decades of estrangement had never happened. Katie, now 14 and already talking about starting her own veterinary practice, was deep in conversation with Jennifer Walsh about business planning. Michael, 12, was showing Kevin Park drawings of his latest invention ideas. Emma was comparing notes with Elena about balancing career ambitions with family planning. The documentary interview proved more emotional than Sarah had anticipated. Director Amanda Chen, herself a small-town transplant who had moved from Los Angeles to rural Oregon to make independent films, asked thoughtful questions that went beyond business metrics to explore the human cost and reward of pursuing impossible dreams. When you first built this company, Amanda asked, did you imagine it would become a catalyst for reuniting your family? Sarah considered the question carefully. Honestly, for most of those early years, I was so focused on proving my parents wrong that I never considered the possibility of proving them right about something else entirely. What do you mean? They always believed that family was the most important thing, that community mattered more than individual achievement. I thought I was rejecting those values by choosing a career over their approval. But I eventually realized that building a business that strengthens families and communities was actually the ultimate expression of their values. Amanda leaned forward, intrigued. So, in trying to rebel against your parents' priorities, you ended up fulfilling them? More than that, Sarah replied. I ended up understanding why those priorities mattered. Success without connection to something larger than yourself feels hollow. But success that creates opportunities for others, that strengthens relationships and communities, that feels meaningful. After the interview, Sarah drove to Millbrook for the monthly family dinner that had become a cherished tradition. The gathering had outgrown the hardware store's cafe area and now took place at the community center, which had been renovated using a combination of Rural Ventures Network resources and volunteer labor from local businesses. Tonight's dinner was special because Emma was presenting her master's thesis research to the family and friends who had supported her education journey. She had spent the past year studying rural hospital management challenges and developing innovative solutions that were already being implemented in 3 different facilities. The traditional model assumes that rural hospitals need to compete with urban medical centers by offering the same services, Emma explained to the assembled group. But that's not sustainable or necessary. Rural hospitals should focus on preventive care, emergency stabilization, and community health education, while developing partnerships with larger facilities for specialized services. Her presentation included case studies from hospitals that had adopted her recommendations, showing improved patient outcomes, reduced costs, and increased staff satisfaction. Several hospital administrators in the audience were taking notes and asking detailed questions about implementation strategies. Sarah watched her sister with deep admiration. Emma had transformed from someone who had settled for safety into someone who was pioneering solutions to complex social problems. Her journey from dental office receptionist to healthcare innovation leader rivaled any entrepreneurial success story. During the dessert course, Tyler stood to make an announcement that surprised everyone, including Sarah. Elena and I have been discussing the future of Rural Ventures Network, he began, and we've decided to transition the platform to nonprofit status. We want to ensure that it remains focused on community impact rather than profit maximization. The room buzzed with interested murmurs. Tyler continued, "We're establishing the Rural Innovation Foundation with 3 core programs: business incubation, mentorship matching, and community development grants. The foundation will be funded through partnerships with corporations, government, agencies, and philanthropic organizations that share our vision." Elena took over the explanation. "We're also launching the Rural Futures Fellowship, which will provide 1-year residencies for established entrepreneurs who want to relocate to small towns and share their expertise with local business owners." Sarah felt a surge of pride mixed with surprise. Tyler and Elena were voluntarily giving up ownership of a platform that could have made them extremely wealthy in order to maximize its social impact. They had internalized the lesson that sustainable success comes from creating value for others. "The first Rural Futures Fellows will arrive next month," Tyler continued. "We have a former tech executive from Seattle who wants to help rural manufacturers implement automation technologies, a marketing specialist from New York who's developing campaigns for agricultural cooperatives, and a former investment banker who's creating financial literacy programs for small business owners." After dinner, Sarah walked through downtown Millbrook with her parents, marveling at how vibrant the area had become. The old movie theater had been converted into a combination performance venue and business conference center. The former diner was now a farm-to-table restaurant run by a chef who had moved from Chicago specifically to work with local producers. Even the abandoned gas station had been transformed into a makerspace where local artists and craftspeople could sell their work. "It's hard to believe this is the same town where I grew up feeling like I had to leave to find opportunities," Sarah told her parents. "The opportunities were always here," Robert replied. "We just didn't know how to recognize them or create the conditions for them to flourish." Linda nodded. "I think every small town has untapped potential. The difference is whether there are people willing to invest in developing that potential instead of just lamenting what's been lost." They paused outside the hardware store, which still occupied its original corner location, but had expanded to include the adjacent buildings. Through the windows, they could see the evening woodworking class in session, where Robert taught traditional joinery techniques to a mix of retirees and young professionals. "You know what I'm most proud of," Robert said, his arm around Sarah's shoulders. "Not the successful business or the beautiful family or even the recognition we've received. I'm most proud that we figured out how to turn our mistakes into lessons that helped other people avoid making the same ones." Sarah understood what he meant. The Mitchell family's story had become a template that other families were using to bridge their own generational and philosophical divides. Rural Ventures Network regularly received messages from parents and adult children who were working to rebuild relationships that had been damaged by disagreements about career choices and life priorities. The next morning, Sarah received a call that would reshape her understanding of her own legacy. Dr. Patricia Williams, dean of the business school at State University, was calling to offer Sarah an endowed professorship focused on rural economic development and family business dynamics. "We want to create the Mitchell Chair in Rural Entrepreneurship," Dr. Williams explained. "The position would involve teaching one course per semester, mentoring student entrepreneurs, and conducting research on sustainable rural economic development strategies." Sarah was intrigued but hesitant. "I don't have an academic background. My expertise comes from practical experience, not theoretical study." "That's exactly why we want you," Dr. Williams replied. "Our students need to learn from someone who has actually built businesses and navigated the challenges they'll face in the real world. Plus, your family's story provides a compelling case study for how business success can strengthen rather than strain family relationships." The offer represented a new chapter in Sarah's career, a chance to share her knowledge with the next generation of entrepreneurs while continuing to build Mitchell Financial Solutions. It would also allow her to spend more time in academic research, potentially developing new models for rural economic development that could be implemented nationwide. After discussing the opportunity with her family, Sarah accepted the position, with the understanding that she would maintain her role as CEO while teaching part-time. Her first course, Family Business Dynamics and Rural Entrepreneurship, was scheduled to launch the following semester. As Sarah prepared for this new challenge, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from angry, dismissed daughter to respected business leader to university professor. Each phase had built on the previous one, creating a compound effect that had multiplied her impact far beyond what she could have achieved by focusing solely on personal success. The real measure of her achievement wasn't the building with her name on it or the company she had built from nothing. It was the ecosystem of relationships and opportunities that had grown from her willingness to transform personal pain into purpose that served others. Standing in her office one final time before heading to the university for her first day of teaching, Sarah looked out at the bustling street scene below. Tyler and Elena were walking to their foundation offices, Elena's pregnancy now visibly showing. Emma was heading to the hospital where she served as director of rural health initiatives. Robert and Linda were unlocking the hardware store, preparing for another day of serving customers and mentoring entrepreneurs. Jennifer Walsh's construction crew was working on yet another building renovation, while Kevin Park's drone business was conducting agricultural surveys that would help farmers optimize their crop yields. Maria Santos was in town to explore opening a regional distribution center that would create dozens of new jobs. All of these lives had intersected and supported each other in ways that created prosperity and opportunity for the entire community. And at the center of it all was a family that had learned to transform disagreement into collaboration, hurt into healing, and individual ambition into collective success. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Katie. "Good luck on your first day of teaching, Aunt Sarah. Remember what you taught me. Dreams are only impossible until someone makes them reality." Smiling, Sarah gathered her teaching materials and headed for the door. She had spent decades proving that her parents were wrong about her potential. Now she had the chance to help the next generation prove that their dreams were just as achievable, regardless of how impossible they might seem to the people who loved them most. The greatest success, she had learned, wasn't having your name on a building. It was having your influence reflected in the achievements of people who had learned to dream bigger, because you had shown them it was possible. And that influence would continue long after any building had crumbled to dust. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.